think about it. I mean, you got to get excited a little bit about this. So the estrogen is what makes that happen. And so the period, we're going to say in this class, we're going to just say everybody's period is 28 days. And despite the fact that there's some variety to it, like we did with the blood numbers, 28 days. That's what it is. And so the uterine cycle or the menstrual cycle is basically just a series that happens every 28 days of the uterus getting excited and getting ready to receive a fertilized egg. The first day number 1 over there, is the degeneration of the functional zone. In other words, this is the part where the uterus is really disappointed. It didn't get pregnant. It got ready. It was so excited, and then it didn't get pregnant. When it didn't get pregnant, it doesn't have enough progesterone, and it starts, and the inside wall starts sloughing off and breaking off. It's caused by constriction of these spiral arteries. That causes that inner lining to just die, and then it falls off. There is some blood loss in the process, but most of it is these patches of the endometrium that are falling off as a menstrual period. So here's kind of what it looks like. Here's all of these uterine glands. There were more of them than this out here. And right along about this level here, you'll start seeing little collections of blood in there and things just breaking off. And that's what is being illustrated here in that picture. Menstruation is basically this process of sloughing off the endometrium. Lasts from 1 to 7 days. It only amounts to 35 to 50 cc's of blood, although then I'm sure most of you will tell me it's at least a quart. It's not. It's just a little bit. I don't want to discuss it. Once that's gone, then it's time to get ready again. We got to get ready for the next potential egg coming down. So we enter into what's called the proliferative phase, when now that inner layer has gone, we got to start rebuilding it. And so these glands start growing again. They multiply and multiply and get thicker and thicker. And all of this is happening on the wall of the uterus at the same time that up in the ovary, one of those little eggs is starting to become more mature and more mature, and it's starting to look like that tertiary follicle with the little island out there and so forth. So, we call this the proliferative phase. It's making more and more. The functional zone is very vascularized. The smaller arteries are starting to grow, and they're turning into larger arteries, carrying more blood to these layers of the inside of the uterus, and then it starts to look like this. So here's that basal layer down here, and now notice there's all of this up there. All of these glands, these are all functional glands, uterine glands, and the endometrium of the uterus is getting thicker and thicker. It's getting really excited to have that egg arrive. So, you know, we're up to along in here just before the 15 days, because 15 days is when the ovulation is going to occur. And then as they continue to get bigger and bigger, we call it the secretory phase. And they just keep growing. Still hoping in this phase over here that there's going to be an egg come downstream. So about 12 days after ovulation, which would be day 27 over here, if it ain't happened, it sort of figures out it ain't going to happen, and it's time the next day on day 28, which is the same as day 1 over here, to start another menstrual period.
Fine, we don't want a baby.
Just before the inner layer starts to slough off, it looks like this. It is really thick, it's really big, it's got zillions of glands, as you can see on that picture right there. So that would be the later days over here in the luteal phase.
But there's a bunch of squiggly blood vessels.
There's a lot of squiggly blood vessels, but most of these squiggly things you see here are glands. Okay? So the uterine cycle stops because that corpus luteum up in the ovary, that thing that turned yellow and made all that progesterone, it dies if there's not fetus down there and a new placenta to make more progesterone to keep it going. The corpus luteum dies, starts to shrivel up, quits making progesterone, and then it's time to start another period. Menarche is the name for the first uterine cycle. It's a very exciting day, and I'm sure every one of you can remember it like it was yesterday.
Oh, the horrors.
Oh, the horrors, I know. Well, menopause is the one I've just lived through in my house, and it's much worse. It's the last days of those things. There's two kinds of... Oh, just bury your head in your hands and think, how can he say something like that? I've got a Thanksgiving story. Maybe I'll tell over and loud. The video's turned off. Amenorrhea is the name of what happens if you don't have periods. Okay? Now, you cannot have periods for several reasons. One is if you're pregnant, you won't have periods. One is if you never started having periods. Some girls get to be 13, 14, 16, 17. They still haven't started having periods. They need to go see their doctor and they need to get some hormone levels drawn and see what the problem is, and maybe even help them out with some hormones to get them going. Secondary amenorrhea is something that happens when you quit having periods. Now, the story I always tell about that is we had this guy in the Dalles who was a doctor, and his wife was a downright nut, in my opinion. But she came to town, and they'd been married for a few years, and they were young, 29, 30 or so. And then the word got out because she told everybody in town that she wasn't having periods anymore. And she wanted to have kids, and she couldn't figure it out. And somebody said, well, gosh, you're running 70 miles a week. She had become this jogger, and she was going running marathons and running all these races all the time. And she just was pouring so much energy into her running that she didn't have any energy to build up her uterus every month, threw everything off, and she quit having periods. It went on for a bunch of months, and finally one of the other doctors in town had to sit them down and say, listen, damn it, just stop running, and let's see if you don't start having periods again. And she did. Next thing you know, she was pregnant and having kids. But that's one of the causes of secondary amenorrhea. They saw it in all the concentration camps. You see it in prison. Anybody that's under a huge amount of stress will usually develop a transient secondary amenorrhea. Yes?
Well, I know a big factor, and not a huge factor, but your weight can be an issue too if you drop below, I think it's 100 pounds.
I think that's true.
Because I know gymnasts generally terminate their period.
Yeah, they're so tiny anyway. They need to start eating.
Are we done?
Kara Petersdorf?
Are we done?
Jeremy?
Are we done now?
Emmons?
Are we?
Hannah? Lewis?
Somebody turn this off? Hal, are we done?
Yeah.
Okay.